I wasn't even intending to cover this with the stream, but then it just kind of popped up, thanks in large part to Wolf catching this. And so we're gonna cover this today. Let me just pull this up here. All right. There we go. One of these days, I'm going to use the jazz remix I did of this. Says Wolf, yes, maybe someday I will. All right, guys. Well, this is outrageous. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this yet. This just recently broke today. And essentially what's happening here is you have a rogue judge, another lawless piece of crap judge, who has decided that he is Mein Führer. He's the little king of America, and he has decided that, guess what? Donald Trump cannot enforce the law, cannot stop illegal aliens from festering within the country. Nope, that's not allowed. And if you're an ICE agent and if you follow your orders, doing what you're supposed to do, which is keep Americans safe, keep non-citizens out of this country, if you do those things, well, you could be arrested. This piece of crap garbage judge is doing yet another dictator move. This just never seems to end. This is from Newsweek, published today, quite recently, but an hour ago. ICE agents can be arrested over unlawful actions, Chicago judge rules. And what do you think he decides is an unlawful action? Why, warrantless arrests, meaning doing their job. You can't run a country this way. This doesn't work. If you can't enforce the law, then everything else is academic. There is no law. There's no order. There's nothing. This is by Robert Alexander. He writes, a federal court in Chicago has ordered sweeping new limits on U.S. immigration and customs enforcement operations in the Midwest, ruling that agents who repeatedly violate federal law and a binding consent decree by arresting people without warrants. Who the hell does this judge think he is? What do you mean you can't arrest people without a warrant? Something has to be done with these judges. This is untenable. Now, this decision issued all the way back, on October 7th. So this is only just hitting the news wires. District Judge Jeffrey Cummings extends. Oh, he's extending court oversight of the agency until February 2nd. What? Oh, okay. So he's extending the court oversight of the ICE agency until next year, February the 2nd. And warns that officers who disregard the order could face contempt or criminal referral. Newsweek reached out to ICE, the offices of Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, who definitely needs a couple of salads and maybe a little bit less ice cream, for comment via email. Why it matters. You know, this is a trend, by the way. All these news agencies are starting to use the why it matters because they're concerned that you, the viewer, the reader, might not know why things matter. The ruling marks a rare judicial rebuke of federal immigration enforcement, signaling that ICE agents themselves can now be held legally accountable for overstepping constitutional limits. By extending a consent decree and imposing new oversight measures, this corrupt judge, I added that part, Cummings effectively transformed what had been an internal policy dispute into a test of whether federal courts can police the enforcers of immigration law. You know, this is not going to end well. What happens when you have some idiot police officer who actually tries to arrest an ICE agent? This is going to go badly. Now, the decision reinforces due process protections for immigrants and citizens alike, curbing warrantless arrests. and asserting that even federal agents must answer to the same legal standards that they are sworn to uphold. This is an attempt to stop the Trump administration from enforcing the law, from getting rid of the 25 to 30 million non-citizens who are currently infesting the U.S. Now, this judge, I believe, knows this is going to get overturned at some point, but that is the purpose, is to slow walk, potentially even cause chaos, because you have these weirdos in Illinois who are hellbent at breaking the law. Pritzker, whatever the idiot mayor of Chicago's name is, I don't even care, don't even remember. These people might actually try to get their cops to do this. And keep in mind, I don't have this on tap right now, but we have documented cases of police officers in places like Portland, and I think also, I'm not sure about Chicago, but certainly in Portland, where they are helping Antifa. So it doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility that you will see corrupt cops who want to stick it to Donald Trump, who have TDS, engaging in arresting ICE agents. This kind of thing could actually happen. I still think it'll get thrown out at the end of the day, but that, I think, is the point, is to slow walk the Trump administration to keep him from doing what he's trying to do in removing illegal immigration in the country. Now, the settlement that should have set the rules. The case, Castellon Nava versus Department of Homeland Security stems from a 2022 settlement requiring ICE to follow strict procedures for warrantless arrests for civil immigration and violations across Illinois, Indiana, Wisconsin, Missouri, Kentucky, and Kansas. The settlement agreement took effect on May 13th and was to remain in place until February 2nd. Boy, they should never have done this kind of a settlement. Key obligations under the 2022 settlement. ICE must issue and distribute a nationwide policy on warrantless arrests and vehicle stops. You know there's only one reason why this was set up. But it's set up so that you can't remove the illegal aliens. Why? So that eventually you give up. When you have over 3 million people in a queue to see immigration judges, court dates years and years out, there is but one reason for this. That reason is to break the American people's will, to just say, screw this, let's give up, let's just go ahead and just let them become citizens. That's the point. Wolf donated $2, super chat, says Nick Sorter has tons of videos with Portland. Yeah, you sent me some of those, I think, yesterday, Wolf, and I might dig those up today. We'll see. If I get around to talking about Portland, I will pull those up, because it is unacceptable with what we are seeing here. Now, Newsweek goes on to write, for any non-citizen's arrest made without an administrative warrant, ICE must document it in a I-213 record, the fact of no warrant, location type, residence, business, vehicle, public area, employment, or resident status, if at business or home, community ties, such as family, home, job, if known, and specific factual basis that the person was likely to escape before a warrant could be obtained. Frickin' bullshit, this is what this is. Again, this is designed to hamstring ICE agents, so that if they do arrest people, it can be only in limited amounts. And so that none of this stuff can get done. That's the point. When you have 25 to 30 million people who need deportation, you put as many things to hamstring the agents in charge of getting rid of them as possible so that they never get deported. And if you had continued, say, with Biden, you had 9 million people crossing into the U.S. during his reign, 3 million turned away at the border, 6 million found their way into the U.S. It was a never-ending flow designed to overwhelm the American people. Because, and I know I've said this ad nauseum, but this goes back to Amnesty 1986. The Democrat Party discovered that Amnesty 1986, roughly about 2.7 million people were given amnesty. Half lived in California. And guess what? California flipped blue. Instantly, 70% of Mexicans would vote Democrat from 2000 all the way till 2016. And so when you import another 25 to 30 million, you're looking at generational power right around the corner. And there have been 9 attempts at granting amnesty to the infestation that we call illegal immigration in this country. This never ends. Let's continue with Newsweek. ICE must share documentation of these arrests in the covered jurisdiction with plaintiffs' counsel to allow for enforcement and monitoring. Judge finds ICE in violation. Of course, this judge does. Cummings found that ICE arrested 22 out of the 26 claimant class members without a warrant in violation of the agreement and the requirements of 8 U.S.C. 1357A2. The court concluded that the agency's Chicago field office failed to substantially comply with the agreement's terms, citing practices such as agents carrying blank administrative warrant forms known as Form I-200s and filling them out after detaining individuals, which, of course, you have to do, or you won't be able to do mass sweeps. Now, this judge isn't a complete functional retard. He knows this. This little Jeffrey Cummings. But that's the point. He's purposely twisting the rules here so nobody gets arrested. Man. Aegis Jalmer says, yeah, I would like to see the corrupt Chicago PD try to arrest them. Yeah, I think that might not end well. I think if you had police departments trying to arrest ICE agents, I think you're going to see things get really, really ugly. Like, insanely ugly. But I think that's part of what they're trying to do here, aside from trying to slow walk the Trump administration. It's to sow chaos. And then they say, oh, well, he's being a Hitler now. He's Hitlerizing us. Now, Cummings, this corrupt piece of shit judge, wrote that the tactic was explicitly designed to circumvent the requirement that officers have probable cause before a warrantless arrest. Well, let's see. How about they're running from ICE agents? How about they're congregating in known places where illegal aliens are congregating to get illegal jobs? Now, under the modified order, ICE must reissue its national policy on warrantless arrests, certify that all relevant personnel are retrained, and file monthly public reports identifying every arrest made without a pre-issued warrant since June 11th. Now, why do you think this piece of shit judge is doing this? He is doing this, again, to basically gum up the works, not let the Trump administration do the job that they promised their voters that they were going to do, which is eradicate this endless stream of illegal immigration in the country. Now, the judge also directed the Department of Homeland Security, he doesn't get to direct the Department of Homeland Security to do anything, by the way, to produce names, numbers, and arrest documents for each case. I wonder if he's going to want names of ICE agents, too. Agents are now required to document in real time, according to this pinhead judge, the specific facts supporting any claim that a person is likely to escape before a warrant can be obtained. The statutory standard for such arrests. You could see how this would if the Trump administration actually followed this idiot freaking judge, there would be no mass deportation ever. It would slow arrests down to a crawl. It would make it impossible to remove these people, which again is the point of this garbage judge. Now, the Department of Homeland Security said in a statement reported on ABC 7 Chicago that it complies with all lawful court orders and is addressing this matter with the court, meaning they're going to have to appeal because this rogue judge is once again thwarting the rule of law and the will of the American people with this piece of crap ruling. Now, immigration rights lawyers hailed the decision as a rare judicial check on enforcement practices they say have expanded since early 2025. Rare, my ass. We've had what feels like dozens of corrupt rulings from these judges trying to stop the Trump administration at every turn. A rare judicial check. Shut the hell up. But of course, these immigrant rights lawyers are incentivized to say such stupid, retarded things because they're trying to get people to pay them money to try to help them protect themselves from the Trump administration. Now, Mark Fleming, a litigation director at the National Immigration Justice Center, told ABC 7 Chicago that, quote, what we have seen now to a much larger scale is federal agents indiscriminately stopping and arresting people without warrants and without the probable cause required by federal immigration laws. And you know what the result is of mass arrests? Over 500,000 people have already been deported, not just arrested, deported. Another 1.6 million have self-deported, knowing that the time is now to get the hell out. In fact, it's likely that we're going to reach somewhere between 2.6 and 2.8 million people will have left the country, whether by force or self-deportations, by year's end. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but this was on tap from Fox. This was a couple days ago. I didn't get to this one. But yeah, there's a big discussion over the record shattering that's going on here. And it's mostly important, too, because the border is closed. 99% reduction in people crossing into the border, meaning we're actually seeing a reduction. Not like the Biden era, where they did a lot of deportations, which was just turning people away from the border, but then still allowing another 2/3 to cross in. Ridiculous. This whole thing is freaking ridiculous. I don't know how you guys feel about all of this, but this is just garbage. Judy Winder says, I picked a bad day to quit sniffing glue. Yeah, this might not be the best day to do that, I think. And Rick Coleman says, well, then the feds arrest the cops trying to arrest them, which I think is what will happen. By the way, if they try to arrest ICE agents, you can expect the Trump administration to say to hell with this and arrest them right back, which will take us to a constitutional crisis of some sorts. But again, I think that's actually the purpose of all of this. Now, the ruling followed evidence that agents in large-scale enforcement operations, such as Operation Midway Blitz, conducted mass workplace and residential raids across the region, which, guess what? You have to do if you're going to get rid of these infestations from your country. You will never get rid of them if you don't. The ruling followed evidence that agents in large-scale enforcement operations, such as Operation Midway, blah, 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 blah. Court filings described, among others, 12 restaurant workers in Liberty, Missouri, who were detained for hours in a locked dining room while armed officers blocked exits so that the non-citizens could not escape. Dun, dun, dun. God, this judge really pisses me off. The judge found that those employees would have reasonably believed that they were not free to leave, and that ICE records did not include any facts that would provide probable cause for flight risk. Yeah, it was time to show that you were a citizen. One exception involved a worker with a prior removal order whose arrest the court deemed lawful. Cummings stopped short of granting the 3-year extension plaintiffs sought, saying a shorter continuation would provide the full 3-year term for which they had bargained. Still, he left open the possibility of contempt proceedings should violations persist, a measure that legal experts note could expose individual agents to sanctions or even arrest if they defy the court. Fuck this judge. I'm sorry. Just screw this judge. This is what do you do when you have so much judicial activism that you can't run a country properly? It seems to be everywhere right now. And there's not a lot of options to get rid of judges. You have, the way I see it, you have 4 options. You have Donald Trump basically telling these judges to go pound sand, to go F themselves, and to order his federal forces to not comply with these judicial activists, which, of course, would then lead to likely clashes between state and federal agents, which may end up happening. I don't know. Or you could try impeaching the judges, but let me tell you, that's not something that's going to work. Impeaching a judge is similar to impeaching a president. You got to go to the House. You got to get your impeachment articles. Simple majority vote in the House. Okay, not so bad, right? Then it gets to the Senate. You have your trial. Then you have to get 2/3 of the Senate to agree to impeach. That never works. That never happens. And you know why? Because it's a political hellhole. And do you think the Democrat Party would cough up the votes to impeach their corrupt judges that are doing them a giant favor? Of course not. So that's not going to work. You could try the judicial conduct complaint, which basically anyone can file a complaint with a circuit's chief judge. You could allege, prejudicial justice by these judges, conflicts or inefficiency, whatever. But again, good luck. And then basically what we're stuck with, what the Trump administration is doing, is going through the appeals process. That's option number 4, which is happening right now. However, this process takes forever because you have to go through the appeals, got to go to the 7th, the 9th, then eventually to the Supreme Court. That could take weeks, months. And all of this time, you're burning daylight. The Donald Trump administration has but 3 years left to go. All of this stuff puts you in a position of not getting the job done if it takes too long. And that is, I think, again, the purpose of all of this. Kevin, for $5, wrote, you can remove any federal judge for bad behavior because it only takes a majority vote by the Constitution. I think, yeah, if you're going through the judicial conduct complaints, but if you're trying to impeach a judge, you have to go through the Senate, and that's where you get screwed because while it's a simple majority vote to impeach, kind of like with Donald Trump, right? Getting impeached, he got impeached. But then you have the trial over whether or not he's going to get convicted, and that you need 2/3 for. And so basically, you're screwed. And yeah, there's nowhere to go. Oh, and yes. And Wolf says we were looking for you. The T-shirt thing is still delayed. Yeah, I've been having a fight with some of these on-demand print services, white label services, who didn't like our "Winter is Coming, Have an Ice Day" shirt. But I should have all of that situated here soon enough. I think I finally found someone who will work with us, but it's been kind of a jumping through hoops. But you'll still get your shirt. So just keep your eye out on X. I saw your message, and I will as soon as I get that ready to go. And let me know what size. And anyway, I'll follow up with you offline at another time. But yeah, so that's basically the problem. Is it's a very, very difficult thing to get rid of judges. This is why it almost never happens. Getting rid of judges is extremely difficult, and I don't know how you'll actually get it done, if we're being frank here. Now, Gil Soffer, ABC's 7 chief legal analyst, said the government is likely to appeal, and the sun rises in the east, but acknowledged that Judge Cummings is certainly sending a shot across the bow. If it's going to be abided by, that's going to slow things down and really impose rigor around the process. No, he's trying to destroy the process. And again, that is the purpose, that is the plan. Now, Newsweek goes on to write, a turning point for accountability. Insha Rahman, the vice president of advocacy and partnerships, boy, you just know when you hear advocacy and partnerships that that's a piece of garbage position, at the Vera Institute of Justice, told Newsweek that the court's order in Chicago reflects a broader principle that no one who wears the badge of public safety should be able to abuse their power or break the law unless you happen to be a Democrat in power. Then we don't care. I added that last part. She noted that while the public debate has focused on Pritzker's, the guy who needs to get a salad, and Johnson's political response to federal troop deployments and immigration enforcement, the judge's decision underscores the same theme: accountability for all levels of law enforcement. That is a stretch, my dear. Now, Rahman described the ruling as very consequential, until it gets overturned in later courts, of course, emphasizing that it not only opens the door to potential prosecutions of ICE officers who violate the decree, but also reasserts judicial authority. You mean steal presidential authority to curb overreach in federal policy. She added that so far, no prosecutions have been reported under the new order. I say try it, partly due to the broader federal court slowdown, but said the decision itself sets an important precedent for how power is exercised in the name of public safety. No, it's just judicial activism, and it's a court trying to create himself as Little King Führer of Chicago and Illinois. Let's see. Craig writes, these liberal judges need arrested for obstruction of justice. Yeah. At some point, there needs to be some kind of way to deal with them, because in some of these judges' orders, it almost, to me, and I'm not a lawyer, but it seems like you're sliding along the edges of treason. You're certainly breaking the law in a lot of cases here. Kevin writes for $10 that use the federal shutdown to downsize the federal judiciary, saying Congress did not reauthorize their courts and that districts and judges that keep getting overruled are non-essential. I think, and I need to double check on this. Let me see. But I think there is a special place for the courts. For example, they have no budget right now. They're out. But by law, they get to keep operating. Let me see. I'm going to see right now. Check this out. But I don't think that he can attack the courts. Let's see. Yeah, the federal judiciary's independence is enshrined in Article 3 of the Constitution, which grants Congress, not the president, authority over court funding, structure, and judgeships. Yeah, so I think Congress would have the power here. And it looks like judges' salaries, for example, remain mandatory. It's mandatory spending and can't be withheld. So I don't know that Trump can. It would be interesting to see if someone would try it. And I'm all for looking into it. I don't know how it would be done, but I'll have to do a little bit more research on that, Kevin. And but thanks again for the donation. And I will certainly look into it and see if we can't maybe do a little bit more in-depth analysis on that later. Because if there's a way to do it, I think that would be fantastic. I just don't know that there is. And it doesn't look like, at least on its face, that you could. Now, the court's actions does not eliminate ICE's authority, Newsweek writes, to detain individuals subject to lawful warrants. Yeah, it just cuts off them at the knees. Rather, it reinforces that such power must be exercised within the framework Congress established, the opinion stated. No, it's just a way to stop them. As immigration advocates prepare to monitor compliance through February, both sides agree on at least one point. The Chicago order represents the defining test of how far federal courts can go in taking over power from the presidency, I added that part, in policing the nation's immigration enforcement machinery. No, it's whether or not the courts get to take on the role of the president. The courts have no power here, but they're trying to assert themselves. Unbelievable. What people are saying, Newsweek writes. Cruz Rodriguez, a Cook County assistant public defender, so basically a nobody, said at a news conference earlier this month that I have had numerous conversations with clients who are presented with a difficult decision of either missing court and receiving an arrest warrant or coming to court and risk being arrested by ICE. Yeah, maybe it's called don't come to the country illegally, you giant douchebags. Maybe try that. Maybe go the hell home while you can on your own. Now, Alexa Van Brunt, the director of MacArthur Justice Center Chicago office, said in a statement that we are gratified that this corrupt chief judge has exercised his authority or stealing his authority to protect our communities by keeping illegal aliens infesting all of our cities and our communities. Again, I'm adding a little of what he's not saying here, which have been under constant attack by ICE. Oh, no. So you're saying that your communities are illegal aliens and other federal agents. This is a necessary and overdue action to ensure that the people who are here illegally in Cook County can access the courts without fear. This stuff is maddening. What happens next, Newsweek writes. The Justice Department is expected to appeal Cummings' ruling to the Seventh Circuit, challenging his authority to threaten contempt against federal agents, and in the meantime, ICE must comply with the order by reporting all warrantless arrests, retraining officers, and meeting monthly with plaintiffs' lawyers to document compliance. And you know what? The Trump administration needs to not comply with this. This is ridiculous. Obviously, it's going to get appealed, but at some point, you just have to say no to these guys. Unbelievable. Now, Cummings will hold a follow-up hearing in November. Again, delay. And further violations could trigger contempt proceedings against individual agents. Good thing they're masked up. I wonder if they can figure out who is who. The outcome of the appeal will determine whether the Chicago ruling becomes a regional anomaly or a national precedent for holding federal immigration officers personally accountable to the courts, aka unable to do their jobs, knowing that corrupt judges will try to get them thrown in jail if they do. It is a way for the judges to steal power. and they need to be stopped. I just, what do you do with these pieces of crap judges? You got to get rid of them. But it's going to be so damn challenging. I don't know what you do here. See. Aegis Jalmer writes, congressional power to abolish federal courts, give Congress the authority to eliminate existing federal courts, except the Supreme Court. Penny writes, they had no problem allowing these people into our country illegally. Exactly. We all know which way the flow of the law goes. It only goes in one direction. The left is perfectly fine with criminal behavior as long as it benefits their long-term goal. The long-term goal is to achieve unlimited power with no opposition party remaining. The way you do this, the quickest way to do this, is through mass amnesty. This is why the border has been left open for over 30 years, because, in case all of you forgot, that amnesty deal back in 1986 signed by Ronald Reagan, his little deal with Tip O'Neill of the Democrat Party, came with a provision that they were supposed to build a wall back in 1986. And of course, it never got done. In fact, the Democrat Party defunded that wall by the early 90s, because by then they had already discovered that they could flip a state with amnesty. California had been a purple-red state. It had voted Republican for 30 years, from the 1950s all the way to 1988 for every presidential election, but never again. Why? Dun, dun, dun. Illegal immigration amnesty happened. The people that were given amnesty needed government assistance, because most people who come here illegally do so because they're lower social economic class. They voted for the party that played Santa Claus the best, which of course is the Democrat Party, because they are the party of big government, the party of handouts, the party of welfare. All they need to do is ride out the Donald Trump era, and the next president coming in is likely not going to have the same drive that President Trump currently has. I mean, we might get lucky, and maybe you will, but you have to assume that you're going to end up with either a linguini-spined Republican, like Marco Rubio was, for example. If you think back to 2015 and lead up to the 2016 election, Marco Rubio was out there promoting amnesty, in stark contrast to Trump's desire to do deportations. Now, I like Marco, but I personally would never vote for the guy for president, because I will never vote for anyone who's pro-amnesty. That's death for a country. So, I don't know. We're in a bad spot here. Something needs to happen with these judicial activists, these traitors to the country, because this stuff can't go on forever. Let's see. Petty Eddie says, can you impeach an unelected district judge? I was under the impression it couldn't be done. It can be done, but it is extremely, very difficult to do. As we kind of already talked about, you would need a 2/3 vote in the Senate to remove. You could impeach with a simple majority vote in the House, but just like the presidency, then you would need 2/3 vote to actually convict and then remove. And that, unfortunately, is not something that happens. There's only been a handful of impeachments, I think, throughout the entire history of our country. In fact, let me just double check this real quick. Let me see. You're talking, for the last 250 years, there have only been 15 federal judges who have been even impeached by the House of Representatives. And only 8 of that 15 were actually convicted and removed. So, can it be done? In theory, yes. Is it likely? No. Nothing would shock me more than that actually working. Not unless you had a massive whirlwind midterm where somehow the country as a whole just said, let's get these insane weirdos out of office, the Democrat Party, and you had 60 Senate votes by Republicans. And even then, good luck. So, no, I don't see that actually happening. Diamond says impeaching judges is almost impossible. We need new laws passed through Congress that if a judge is lawless or endangers officers or the public through his orders, punishment in jail is in order. You know what's really messed up, Diamond? A judge can be arrested, thrown in jail, and he is still a judge. I don't know if you knew this, but yeah, you can be a criminal as a judge and not lose your judgeship. You can't even get rid of a judge that way. No joke. In fact, let's see. See if I can find this. A couple months ago, I remember researching this. I think the guy's name was Harry Claiborne. Let me see if we can find him here. Let's see. Yes. I think this guy was in jail for a while he was still a judge. Yeah, he was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison. And yeah, let's see. I'll have to read about more up on him later, but maybe we'll do a follow-up story on this. But yeah, basically the long and the short of it is these judges have way too much leeway here. And I just, it's not a tenable situation for this country to keep having rogue judges. In theory, you expect the judges to, have the best intentions for the country and to follow the rule of law. But as we've seen for at least all of my life, and probably long before my time, court corruption is everywhere. So it's a bad time. And see, here's the thing. You have to understand, the reason why the left is doing this is going to lead into this secondary story that I have on tap here. I was going to talk about this yesterday, but I didn't get a chance. They believe, the left believes, and believe me, these judges are in lockstep with the political hacks that are the elected Democrats and their counterparts in the media. They all think alike here. And they believe that Donald Trump is building his army here to stop their illegal activity, but nevertheless building an army to stop them. For the last 10 years, these guys have been losing their damn minds. They've been pressing the repeat button of Orange Man bad, and Hitler, 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 and of course, Trump the dictator, Trump the mad painter, Trump the communist, and of course the dictator, and now King, right? Look at the No Kings March, which, by the way, little fun fact. I might talk about it later today or maybe in a follow-up video, but the minority groups, like the black community, just in large part stayed away from that protest. They were like, hell no, we don't want to be lumped in with these insane weirdos who think it's still the 1960s with their songs of justice. You always get like these beautiful moments. We have these people singing. I swear she needs a lot of salads. What is it with some of these Karens and the need for salads? But they do. They love to sing, and it's embarrassing. We keep seeing this over and over again. Like, why? Who in the 1960s? I guess this was the hip thing to do.
That's the chorus.
Where you go out there and you sing to show the man.
You may be surprised. People all over the world are getting organized.
The amount of cringe here is making me want to just fall over and die or something. This is
all you fashion bound blues. All you fashion bound blues.
And on it goes. Yeah, you get the point. They're still living in the past, but they truly believe that Donald Trump is building his army of Trump soldiers. This is why you have judges like that Cummings idiot who's out there trying to stop the Trump administration from being able to enforce the law. all these facets, I think, are interconnected, intertwined as to how we got to this place. But I think deep down, where the brain rot hasn't fully disintegrated their minds, leftist news rags, opinion piece writers, and probably people who are in elected positions of power, some at least anyway, I think they know that all their little protests are not working. I think they know that this court corruption that's everywhere, that is damaging this country, I think they don't think they're going to win long term because the Supreme Court keeps ruling in their favor. And so the fear is real. It's raw. That they think that Donald Trump will someday become the dictator that they have tried to turn him into by trying to get him thrown in jail. So this is from the left-wing rag Vox. These guys are garbage news outlets, but we're going to use them today. A-Lord says, people could sing better in the 1960s. Yeah, they really could, couldn't they? I guess there was no auto-tune to rely on. Vox writes, this is by Ian Millhiser, a new Supreme Court case could turn the National Guard into Trump's personal army. Oh no. The justices could hand Trump the power to deploy troops anywhere, anytime, and against Americans. Dun dun dun. It's hard to think of a more dramatic question than the issue before the Supreme Court in Trump versus Illinois, where this corrupt judge is trying to further stymie ICE. President Donald J. Trump wants to use federalized troops to quell protests outside an immigration detention facility near Chicago, as he has every right to do because his people are endangering federal agents. 2 federal courts have already attempted to thwart the rule of law that federal law does not permit Trump to do this, which of course is a retarded ruling by these judges who are being corrupt. They know the ruling is garbage, but they're doing it anyway. It's all about doing anything they can to stop or slow Trump. But this case is now before the Supreme Court, dominated by 6 Republican justices who, damn it, like to follow the Constitution and rarely part ways with the leader of their political party because they are following the law, the Constitution. Oh no, they're not making up law like the other 3 justices do. But the case, Now, Trump's arguments in the Illinois case, moreover, are quite aggressive. His lawyers are claiming that the question of when the president may exercise his power to take control of the National Guard members who are ordinarily under the command of state officials is committed exclusively to the president and cannot be reviewed by federal courts. Yeah. And you know why that's the case, you dingbat? It's because we've already seen from the Democrat Party, oddly enough, the 1950s, the 1960s, the Jim Crow laws, the segregation, the attempt to stop black people from joining the greater community. If they had relied on local forces there to decide when the National Guard could come in and enforce the end of segregation, we would still be living in a very segregated world. But of course, this doofus probably doesn't know what's beyond his own nose, and so probably doesn't know this, or if he does, he doesn't care. He's a political activist and hack, so there you go. Now, once Trump does so, his lawyers claim, the guardsmen serve under the command and control of federal military officials, and ultimately the president as commander-in-chief. Well, yeah, that's how that works when you co-opt the National Guard. Are you shocked? Are you surprised? Or is he just retarded? I don't know. Now, thus, he writes, if the injustices embrace this argument, Trump could potentially gain unchecked authority to call up the National Guard and order armed guardsmen to protect voting precincts in Democratic regions of the country. Well, if you have your a-holes out there threatening violence, you might have to. But of course, this is a scary tactic for the readers of Vox. The case arises out of Trump's decision to place several hundred members of the Illinois and Texas National Guard under his control and order them to an immigration detention facility in Broadview, Illinois, which has been under siege for months by the hate groups Antifa and others, about 12 miles west of Chicago. Since September, a small group of people have protested against the Trump administration's immigration policies outside of the facility, and some of them have allegedly vandalized federal law enforcement vehicles. They should be in jail. Come on now. What the hell are we talking about here? You can't keep allowing these lunatics to threaten our ICE agents, to threaten our federal agents. You got to arrest them, try them, find them guilty, and then throw away the key. Some people have also been arrested for violent crimes, such as aggravated battery. According to Judge April Perry, a federal district judge who temporarily blocked this deployment, another political activist judge who is corrupting the rule of law, April Perry, who said the typical number of protesters is fewer than 50, and the crowd has never exceeded 200. It doesn't matter how many people are there. If they are threatening ICE agents, one is one too many. And so to justify Trump's decision to deploy military personnel to an American town, his lawyers rely on a federal law that permits the federal government to take command of National Guard members if there is a rebellion or danger of a rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States, or if the president is unable with irregular forces to execute the laws of the United States, which, my friends, is happening on both counts. What the fuck are we even talking about here? Yeah. A rebellion? What do you think these sanctuary states are trying to do? They are breaking the law with their sanctuary laws. They are fighting the removal of criminals by the millions in their states. What are we talking about here? What do you think is not a rebellion? Now, maybe it's not armed armies out on the streets trying to capture federal buildings. But they don't need to. They have their goose-stepping brown shirts, the Antifa hate group, the Antifa terrorist group. You have the whacked-out weirdos out there trying to burn down federal buildings, trying to attack federal agents. The hell are we even talking about? And TOB, criminals, there aren't. Well, I think you need to learn what words mean, Tio. If you break into this country illegally, you are by definition a criminal. No ifs, no ands, no buts. And every day that you stay in this country illegally, you continue to be a criminal. You continue to break the law. That's how the world works. Now, maybe, for those idiots out there who have been living in a dream, not realizing that all this time we have been pretending that the laws don't mean anything and have been allowing them to stay, that doesn't take away from the fact that they are criminal a-holes who need to be removed from the country. It's okay, Tio. I know you're into allowing criminals to be criminals. I get it. But that just makes you a functional retard. But that's okay. We are a equal opportunity live stream here. So we even allow people who are brain dead to be in the audience. That's it. Anyway, so Trump, in other words, claims that a small crowd that ranges from a few dozen people to a couple hundred has so overwhelmed the United States' capacity to enforce its own laws that it justifies using the military against U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. Yeah, well, if they are threatening ICE agents, if they are attempting to stop federal agents from doing their jobs, guess what? Those people need to be in jail and out of polite society. Needless to say, Vox writes, the stakes in the Illinois case are breathtaking. If Trump is allowed to use military personnel to suppress a tiny group of protesters and vandals, then it is unlikely that this court will place any meaningful limits whatsoever on his ability to deploy the U.S. military against Americans. Well, here's a thought for you. Maybe don't break the law. Maybe don't try to stop the federal government from enforcing the law. Might be a good place to start. Petty Eddie for $9.99 says the problem is we have reached the precipice and are the actual snowball rolling down the hill. We are doomed. Well, I'm not much of a pessimist. I don't know that we're actually doomed. The long and the short of it is the courts right now are fighting tooth and nail to stop Trump. But Trump is still getting his way for the most part. It's been slowed down tremendously. But we still are at over 2.2 million people who have been removed from the country since Trump took office. Over 500,000 have been deported, not just arrested, but actually kicked the hell out of the country by the federal government. And 1.6 million people have self-deported, realizing, oh, snap, the federal government is coming for us. Let's get out while we can so we don't get a lifetime or 20-year ban or whatever the hell it was. And there's an estimate that there will probably be somewhere around 2.6 to 2.8 million people will have been ejected from the country in one form or another by the end of the year. Now, that's a far cry from the 25 to 30 million who are still infesting the country, but But it's, it's still progress. And remember, you've got the doubling of ICE agents going on right now. All the hiring here with $100 billion that Congress gave Trump. And you still have the border wall being built. So it's not over. And I still think we're going to get to true mass deportation on par with Dwight D. Eisenhower's operation that I can't name because the name would get this stream flagged. So can't mention it. But you can look that up in the 1950s. In just a matter of months, deported over 1 million. And upwards of potentially 3 million, but people dispute the numbers. So at minimum, 1 million Mexicans from the country who were here illegally. So it's been done. And I think Trump will eventually get there. Right now, we're at the point in time where there is the battle of the courts. Once this stuff gets mostly fleshed out and Trump is able to win these cases, as he should, because if there's any rationality here, if there's any following the Constitution, Trump has the authority to do this. So if we get to that point, then you can expect mass deportations, which again I think is what Vox is worried about, because they can see the writing on the wall that the stage is being set for Trump's army, if you will, to go in there and root out the scum who infect and infest our country. Uh-oh, looks like Wolf is giving the TOB a timeout. Well, that's too bad. So Vox goes on to say, what does the law actually say about presidential use of the National Guard? If you want to understand the Illinois case, it is helpful to first understand how the framers of the original Constitution understood the role of the military. Let's see what this guy has to say. The framers were quite fearful that a military power would be directed against the nation's own citizens or against state governments that were out of step with whoever ran the federal government. And you know what they did? They gave their citizens the right to keep and bear arms, which you radical weirdos have been fighting tooth and nail to limit. In fact, from my point of view, even things like the restrictions on so-called automatic weapons or assault weapons, I don't think that those kind of laws should even exist, personally. Now, that may not jive with everyone's opinions here, but I don't think so. But this guy, I'm sure, would be for that. In fact, I don't know him from Adam, but based on who he's writing for, I would not be surprised to find out that, shock and surprise, he'd want gun control and take away the ability for citizens to protect themselves, except when it comes to Trump's army. Now, indeed, Vox writes, they are so fearful that they imagine a country with no permanent national army. This is why the Constitution prohibits Congress from appropriating any money to take to the Army that does not expire after 2 years. As the Supreme Court explained in Perpich v. Department of the Defense among the framers back in 1990, there was a widespread fear that a national standing army posed an intolerable threat to individual liberty and to the sovereignty of the separate states. The framers did, however, contemplate that each state would maintain a militia, which could, under conditions established by Congress, be called into federal service to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, aka giving them to the president. Dun, dun, dun. Though the United States military might and its intolerance for standing armies has obviously grown considerably since the founding, federal law still reflects the framers' fear of military personnel being used to oppress the people or to trample on states' internal governance. While the president may, in limited circumstances, under the National Guard, the modern version of founding-era militias, into service on U.S. soil, which such orders are supposed to be a last resort. Well, what do you think this is when you have an attempt to do a coup on the country by importing literal 20 to 30 million people who are not citizens into the country to give them citizenship to overwhelm the population of their rights? You disenfranchise people by granting citizenship to tens of millions of non-citizens. And you know what else will happen if there's amnesty down the road? You open the doors again for more amnesty, for more illegal aliens to come flooding in. What do you think happened after Amnesty 1986? That was supposed to be the one-time deal. We give them all amnesty and everything's groovy gravy and we're all good to go. Except then another 20, 30 million people showed up. 10 times the number of people showed up from the first amnesty to the second. And if you think that the Democrat Party would shut the borders if they grant another amnesty down the road, no, they would leave that open. So you could get it again. That's the bottom line. That's what's happening here. So this is a last resort. Petty Eddie writes for $9.99. Once the courts are cleared, we then have to deal with the citizens who are willing to protect the illegals. This is a bigger challenge, in your own opinion. Yeah, and this will be a huge challenge to overcome because you have millions of TDS lunatics out there who have huffed the paint, who have been sniffing the gas of the left to the point where their brains have rotted and are short-circuited, who believe that it's not just Orange Man bad that's the problem, but it's everyone who might agree with Orange Man bad. I know it's anecdotal, but there's a girl I know, this DJ, who I won't name, not going to give her any press here. But this idiot used to be part of the whole hippie, live and let live types. She is radical hate infestation. She wants the death of Charlie Kirk supporters. She wants the death of Donald Trump. She wants people arrested, thrown out, depersoned. She is a microcosm of what the left has become. The modern day left, especially the next generations, the millennials, the Zoomers, and the Gen Alphas, all of these younger radicals are just hate-filled. They have been raised to believe that words equal violence. And so since words equal violence, that means by disagreeing with them, you're assaulting them, you're hurting them, you're trying to kill them, which means that they are allowed to do things to you physically. This is why cancel culture took off so fast with the left. They had no compunction against depersoning, deplatforming people. Thank you for that comment, Petty Eddie. Now, Trump, Vox goes on to write, however, asks the Supreme Court to read these limits to be entirely meaningless. His primary argument is that he can simply declare that a rebellion or similar emergency exists and that the courts can do nothing to intervene, even if that declaration is ridiculous. But is it ridiculous? Because I'll tell you right now, it's not. The left is doing everything they can to break the rule of law, to break the Constitution, to break this country by allowing criminals to flood the zone. They have abdicated their job. They have allowed crime to run rampant to the point where this country cannot continue to exist if it maintains its present course. Why do you think Donald Trump won in 2024? Because Biden was so freaking terrible and opened the door, or whoever was running the scenes behind him, because he clearly was mentally gone. But by opening the borders up, you had an invasion, you had an attack on America itself. And the left cheered, and the left celebrated because they knew it meant the beginning of the end. All they needed to do was grant amnesty, and it was over. And by the way, they tried. 2021, they attempted amnesty. This almost happened. This country almost lost in 2021. This is some scary crap that we are living through. This was called the U.S. Citizenship Act. Let me pull this up here just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. They keep trying to do this. Okay? This is from the federal government. This happened in 2021. This was the 9th time in the last 2 decades that they have tried to give these people millions and millions and millions of people instant citizenship. This is how you destroy the country. They are actively attacking the United States. This is H.R. 1177, to provide an earned path to citizenship, to address the root causes of migration and responsibly manage the southern border, and to reform the immigration visa system and for other purposes, blah, blah, blah. All garbage. All it means was to give them citizenship because they were never going to close the border. This is how close we got to a coup on the American public itself. This is a rebellion. That is why we are at where we are at right now. But this writer, he's a political hack. He wants that to happen. So of course, he's not going to look at or view it as a rebellion. Now, alternatively, Vox writes, Trump, asks the justices to read words like rebellion or unable with regular forces to execute the laws of the United States so broadly that they encompass a small protest that has never grown beyond a couple hundred people. It doesn't matter. You're stopping them from arresting illegal aliens. They are threatening to kill ICE agents. Attacks on ICE agents have increased by 1,000%. What do you think is happening here? If he wasn't out there bringing in the National Guard like in Los Angeles, there would be looting, there would be fires, there would be burnings. All you have to do is go back and look at Trump's first term. Remember all that? Remember Chap Chop or Chaz Zone, whatever the hell it was called, where they literally took over a city. Antifa took over a part of Portland, and nobody did anything because Trump, back then in his first term, was trying to go through the normal channels. He learned his lesson. Don't do that. Don't give these people any credence. Don't give them any leeway at all, not even an inch. Now, Trump's first argument arises out of a single line from the court's decision in Martin v. Mott that, if read in isolation, does seem to support his broad claim of authority over the National Guard. Martin involved a previous version of the federal law governing presidential control of the militia, and one sentence of that opinion states that the authority to decide whether calling up the militia is justified belongs exclusively to the president. But, as both federal courts that heard the Illinois case concluded, Trump's lawyers read this line out of context. Martin involved a member of the New York militia who refused President James Madison's order to report for federal service during the War of 1812. And in that case, the Supreme Court asked the question, is the president the sole and exclusive judge, whether the exigency has arisen, or is it to be considered an open question upon which every officer to whom the orders of the president are addressed may decide for himself, and equally open to be contested by every militiaman who shall refuse to obey the orders of the president? The court then answered the question with the line Trump's lawyers quote, saying that the president has the authority to decide whether to federalize the militia. This guy's trying to argue semantics here. Good times. Gabriel Gibson in the chat writes, make asylums great again, white straitjacket for the black robe. Well, the big thing is going to be to reform the courts. It's got to be done in a way that doesn't destroy the judicial independence, because you do need judges, in theory, to be ruling on the rule of law and not to be swayed by political trends. You need people to vote or to judge, to make rulings based on what the Constitution says. The problem is that these judicial activists who now run rampant in our court system were put there for one purpose and one purpose only by their Democrat counterparts, and that was to thwart the rule of law and to further the agenda of big government, of welfare, to tear down the Constitution. This is why you get a lot of judges on the left who believe in a living document, meaning that the words don't mean things the way they were written. You could interpret it different depending on what decade you're in, what century you're in. Because this boils down to the Democrat Party does not like the Constitution because it doesn't stipulate what the government can do to you. It only stipulates what it can't. And they don't like that they can't crush citizens who don't follow their orders. Let's see. Now that leaves Trump's argument with that a small gathering of pro-immigration protesters amounts to a rebellion or a mob that so threatens the United States that the law will cease to function unless military personnel suppress that mob. Well, guess what? If they can't do their job where they're in the cities like Illinois, Chicago, because of a couple hundred protesters, guess what? Yeah, they can't function. What do you want the federal government to do? To say, oh, well, I guess the law doesn't matter because a couple hundred protesters say we can't do it. What crack is this writer smoking? What do you think this means? The Vox writer doesn't like this, though. And as Judge Perry notes, says the Vox writer, federal immigration officials have seen a huge increase in arrests and deportations, despite the fact that several dozen people have been protesting outside of a single immigration detention facility in Illinois. That's because they bring in the National Guard when the people try to stop them. Take a look at LA. So the government appears to be executing its laws just fine, only after they bring in the troops. Yeah. Shocking, isn't it? Now, Judge Perry, this corrupt judge, defines the term rebellion to mean a deliberate, organized resistance, openly and avowedly opposing the laws and authority of the government as a whole by means of armed opposition and violence. This judge is trying to tweak this so that we can keep ruling against Trump. And if there was armed resistance, he would try to find a new term. Thus, mere lawbreaking or even lawbreaking that seeks to prevent federal officials from carrying out their duties is not enough. The alleged rebellion must actually threaten the authority of the government as a whole. The writer says, that definition makes sense, seeing as the word rebellion is tucked within a statute that also targets foreign invasions or major uprisings that threaten anarchy. What do you think is happening outside of these ICE agents' buildings, these federal buildings? They're little mini anarchies, which if you don't deal with, become big anarchies. Remember 2020? Remember all the massive protests, the looting, the burning? Where do you think that came from? This writer's so dumb, it makes my head hurt. Anyway, he goes on to say, it makes sense that the word rebellion should be read to encompass similar threats to national security, blah, blah, blah. I'm an idiot, is what he says. So, will that be enough to persuade the Supreme Court? Probably not, he says, given the Republican justices' extraordinarily solicitude for the head of their political party. No, it's called for enforcing the Constitution. But a decision authorizing Trump to use the National Guard to suppress a minor protest would be a sharp departure from the nation's history of caution regarding domestic use of the armed forces. You're forgetting the civil rights era, where once again your party was on the wrong side of history, as you people like to say. The National Guard got called in. Why? Because the left was in open rebellion of the Constitution and the rule of law. Which is what's happening here. We're just rinse and repeating history. The only difference is you don't have a Democrat KKK in power. That's it. Now, the Illinois case may turn on whether the Trump administration can be trusted. No, it's on whether the rule of law matters or not. In its brief to the justices, the Trump administration suggests that there has been a breakdown of order outside the Broadview facility. They claim that the federal law enforcement agencies have been forced to operate under the constant threat of mob violence, which they have, and to divert resources from enforcement efforts to protect federal agents and property, which again, they have. Meanwhile, the Trump administration says local forces have failed to respond, which again they have, or unaccountably delayed their response even when federal agents face life-threatening violence. And you know what? I'm going to pull this up from Wolf, who sent this to me earlier. We have cases where the local forces are actively aiding these wannabe terrorists here. This is from Nick Sorter, and I don't know what date this actually occurred, but this was one of these protests against ICE agents.
Nice aim, I love that.
So these guys are flashing lights at federal agents, harassing them. So the agents are shooting gas pellets to try and push them out. Okay.
What did that person do?
Looks like they're shining something in the...
See, we're trying to move them. See, there's the flashlight right there. See that?
They're hiding behind the sign.
Now watch these guys. Who do they run to?
And they're running.
They ran to the cops. And you say, oh, this is not a rebellion. And what are we talking about here? And there's a lot of other footage like this.
Running for cover behind Portland police. Oh my God.
Police have tried to
You've
help.
got to be kidding me.
Antifa arrest ICE agents trying to find ways to charge them with crimes. At some point, you're going to need the National Guard because you have corrupt police agents, you have corrupt states, you have corrupt governorships, cities, towns, local counties, etc. The left, the Democrat Party, is simply repeating their old KKK days. They are going to just not care what the law says. They're going to run things their way. And once again, the Republicans are going to have to come in there and break this garbage up. Oh, thanks for the input. Yeah. So this is ongoing, but this guy doesn't think it is a rebellion. Now, the Illinois plaintiffs and state and local police, meanwhile, presented more nuanced pictures, saying, well, we didn't do nothing. Remember the order to stand down, to not stop Antifa types from attacking ICE agents when they were ramming cars? But no, they have a more nuanced, shut the hell up. And in their view, while the protesters have sometimes engaged in criminal activity, state and local police have been responsive to the federal government's needs, except when they're not. And much of the violence near the facility was provoked by bad policing from federal officials. Oh, yes, it was the federal officials' fault that the mob outside that was threatening them, trying to burn down their buildings, they didn't handle it properly. This is why you leave it to the president to bring in the National Guard. Because when you have corrupt officials from these states, these sanctuary states, by definition, who are breaking the law with their sanctuary statuses, at some point you have to say enough. Now, Judge Perry, the corrupt a-hole, summarized the Broadview Police Department's position, saying that they believe that the tone of the protesters changed for the worse after federal officials made a show of force. Let's see. Let's go to his ending here. Now, Judge Perry's determination that the Trump administration is not credible because he's a political activist judge, and that the state and local police versions of events matters because appellate courts are only supposed to second-guess a trial judge's factual findings if they are clearly erroneous. But of course, these judges don't care about that. They're just going to make crap up so that they can stop Orange Man bad, Hitler, Hitler, Hitler. So the Supreme Court should presume that the Trump administration's portrait of widespread chaos outside a Broadview facility is wrong. This guy is just whistling Dixie. And then he writes, but many of the Republican justices are openly hostile towards district judges who do not share their views. Well, that's because they're mentally ill. They're deranged. And those justices are particularly credulous towards Trump and his administration, especially in cases involving law enforcement. Well, that's because they're seeing Trump as the only one out there who is trying to enforce law and order. We live in a lawless society. Where has this writer been for the last 10, 15 years? And so he writes, much to his chagrin, there's a real chance that the Republican justices will resolve the Illinois case by simply assuming that order has indeed broken down in Broadview and then interpreting the law as if Trump's claims are gospel. Boo. Frickety-hoo. In the worst case scenario, they could also demand that lower courts defer to Trump even if he uses the military to suppress dissident or to intimidate Democratic voters, which of course he's just making up out of his ass because that is not even on the docket. So this is essentially where everything is at. Yeah. So the left is afraid that Trump army is going to happen. And this is why you have this attempt to now rule in Illinois that ICE agents can be arrested. All of this is linked together, even though they are different judges. It is what it is. So, all right. Well, I think we're going to bring it to a close here, guys. We've been going a little over about an hour and 15, which is longer than I normally do. Yeah, so we'll pick this up tomorrow. Normally, I've been streaming a little bit later in the day, but I happen to have a chance to get in earlier, so I figured we'd do it. I appreciate you guys being in here, and special thanks to everyone who donated with super chats. Petty Eddie, we had Kevin, thank you guys so much. Wolf, of course, and then to everyone else that we had a chance to chat with. You guys have been amazing. I appreciate all of you guys for joining me on this channel. It means a lot. We've been fighting the algorithm for the last couple of months, and I'm having way too much fun streaming. This is a new thing for me. As most of you who have been watching this channel for any extended period of time, you know that I've always done pre-recorded episodes where I sit down and write it and then film it and then put it up there. Whereas the last couple of weeks, really we've been kind of focusing more and more on streaming. I will still do pre-recorded content, but I'm going to do more of this as well. I like the opportunity to speak with you guys directly as we do this. So again, thank you to everyone for joining me. Be sure to check out my alt channel, which I will be putting more and more content up in the near future. It's topical, not tropical, but topical umbrella. And here we'll cover, there's going to be more sarcasm, more humor, and a lot of times we'll cover more more topic type, so it won't always be the big news stories of the day, but it'll give me a chance to kind of spread my wings, and this is my own personal project here. And so if you get a chance, check out this other channel and join me there as well. In the meantime, thank you all for joining me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you guys, and I will see you all in the next one. Should be tomorrow. See you then.